Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Audrey Stewart, and on behalf of Harvard Bookstore, I am very excited to welcome you to tonight's event with Durkhanai Ayubi discussing her debut cookbook, Parwana, Recipes and Stories from an Afghan Kitchen. And as a special treat tonight, she is joined by her mother, Farida Ayubi, for a conversation and a demonstration. And as a quick warning, we will all be hungry by the end of this talk, so grab a snack before you get settled in. Through virtual events like tonight's, Harvard Bookstore continues to bring authors and their work to our community and our new digital community during these challenging times. Every week, we're hosting events here on Zoom, and as always, our event schedule appears on our website at harvard.com/events, where you can also sign up for our email newsletter and browse our shelves from home. This evening's discussion will conclude with some time for questions. If you have a question at any time during the talk tonight, go to the Q&A button on your screen and we'll get through as many as time allows. If you would like to purchase a copy of Parwana, there will be a link in the chat where you can purchase. All sales through this link support Harvard Bookstore, so thank you, especially during this difficult time for community spaces like your local bookstore. There will also be a link for donation in the chat if you would like to give additional support to Harvard Bookstore. Your purchases and financial contributions make this virtual author series possible, and now more than ever supports the future of a landmark independent bookstore. Thank you so much for tuning in support of our authors and the incredible staff of booksellers at Harvard Bookstore. We sincerely appreciate your support now and always. And finally, as you may have experienced in virtual gatherings these last few months, technical issues may arise. If they do, we'll do our best to resolve them as quickly as we can. Thank you in advance for your patience and your understanding. Now I have the pleasure of introducing Durkhanai Ayubi. Durkhanai is a freelance food writer and restaurateur who helps run 2 restaurants with her family. She has written for a number of international newspapers and websites and is currently undertaking a fellowship for social equity funded by the Atlantic Institute in New York. Her debut cookbook, Parwana, is not just a cookbook. It is a culinary family history and a story about how food can connect us, complete with beautiful pictures as well as recipes for delicious rice dishes, curries, meats, dumplings, Afghan pastas, sweets, drinks, chutneys and pickles, soups and breads. It's a cookbook you don't want to miss out on. And I'll leave you with this quote from Nigella Lawson. When you have to take your country away from you, home has to reside in family and food. But Parwana is more than an elegy. It is a celebration. The recipes in it bulge with color and flavor and life. And on that note of praise, I'll turn things over to our chefs. Durkhanai, Farida, the virtual kitchen/stage is yours.
Hello, thank you so much, Audrey. I'm Durkhanai. This is my mum, Farida.
Hello, very nice to talk with you and see you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Glad to have you both.
Thank you, Audrey. It's so lovely to be part of this virtual author series during a time when local bookstores, hospitality industry, so many people around the world are having to make massive shifts. And we're so glad to be a part of this series with the Harvard Bookstore. So just to kind of give you an idea of what we'll be doing for the next 45 minutes, an hour or so, we're going to start with just a little cooking demonstration by my mum, Farida. And the recipe we've chosen to share is called tokhma banjarmi, which is just Afghan breakfast eggs. I know it's dinner time for most of you, but for us here, it's 10 a.m. or 10:30 in the morning. And this is just a simple but really tasty kind of option for breakfast that we thought we would share with you. And then after that, we're going to move into just our seating area next door and have a Q&A, well, more like a discussion between me and my mum about our thoughts on the book and what it means to us, and just a bit more of a deep dive on the book and Afghan cuisine and a few things, we'd love to share with you. So I'll show you the recipe in the book. It's called tokhma banjarmi, Afghan breakfast eggs, and it's basically just delicious eggs in a onion, tomato, garlic, cheese. saute base. And Afghans love to have everything with naan on the side. So we've got some of our naan as well, but we'll get started on the cooking.
Yes. So for this cooking, we need one onion,
Which is kind of thinly sliced up already.
Yeah, 1 cup oil.
A cup of oil, and what type of oil, Mum? It doesn't really matter, but
doesn't matter. But I use sunflower oil.
Sunflower oil, yeah.
And this is egg. We will use 4 of them.
4 eggs.
And also
Coriander.
Coriander and tomato, 3 tomato, garlic and chili, black pepper, salt, and chili powder.
To garnish, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we will start it.
Just kind of chunky, but kind of thinly slice the tomato, and that's just gonna become really nice and kind of soft, and release all its nice flavors into the base of the eggs. Every time I've cooked these eggs for friends that haven't had Afghan food before, they get really, well, they love it, but it's just like, you know, eggs are usually so simple, but this is kind of elaborate, but simple to make, but the flavors are just really lovely and elaborate.
Nice, yeah. We first put the oil.
So just use kind of a heavy base, good quality kind of fry pan so that there's no sticking.
Wait a little bit to get.
Just heat up a little, yeah.
That time we can chop our chili and garlic.
Okay. A typical Afghan base for sauce dishes is tomato, garlic, onion, right? We love our garlic. Yeah. And chili is always to taste, although there's usually a bit of a kick in the food. Okay, so the oil's kind of heated up a bit. The onions go in. So how long do you leave that on for, Mum? What do you look for?
Just have to take a little bit soft, the onion, not too brown.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that
Just soften up a little, yeah.
For egg, we don't want to bring it like, you know, gold or brown.
Yeah, you don't really want to caramelize it too much.
Yeah. Now I add the garlic.
So the garlic next.
Yeah.
And how much garlic are you putting in, Mum?
3.
3 cloves? Yeah. You can add 3 or 4 cloves, whatever you like. Yeah. And they're kind of diced a bit, just chopped a bit roughly, so they're kind of still a bit chunky in there.
Yeah, as much as you can, you put the still delicious with the egg.
Yeah.
Garlic.
Also, yakisha memonin right ba'akhir.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just some chili. You're just going to use one chili?
Yeah, now I use one and we garnish it with chili as well. One chili will be enough. It will be hot.
It's smelling really good. The chili smells great. One of my favorite smells growing up that's actually a bit nostalgic as well is just coming home from school and smelling onions and garlic and chili frying, because it just makes up so much of the base of a lot of our dishes, doesn't it? Yeah.
You know something is going on.
You always know there's something good to eat when you can smell that. So it's starting to brown up a little.
Yeah. Time for tomato.
The tomatoes, yeah.
Yeah.
So is that
because it is tofu banjaroni, meaning it's tomato with tomato and egg.
That's
why
the name?
we put 3 egg, 3
So there's a lot of tomato in this dish, but that's what makes it very tasty. So in Farsi, the name of the recipe tohum means egg, and banjaroni means tomato. So it's a tomato and egg dish.
Yeah.
You can just kind of see the tomato releasing a bit of its juices.
So I will use half of the salt for this one.
So Mum's putting in about 1 teaspoon of salt now into the base.
Yeah.
And then the other teaspoon, so the recipe says 2 teaspoons, but really you can use as much or as little salt as you like, but 1 teaspoon in the base is good. And then the other teaspoon later when the eggs are cracked in, yeah.
So now we leave this like this. It will slowly getting like being ready. We will put the egg and then
crack the eggs.
Yeah.
So we're going to use how many eggs, Mum?
4 will use.
4 eggs, yeah. So that's all kind of starting to blend in. You don't want it to get too watery, Mum's saying. You just kind of want it all to fuse together and keep its own shape. So the tomatoes are still more or less in that sliced up shape that we put them in.
Now for the egg.
Yeah, so that looks about right now. A few minutes of just letting it all cook and soften up. And now we're just going to put the eggs in whole. That other teaspoon of salt or salt to taste goes in now.
Yeah.
And that's the chili powder.
When a little bit cook, we will put some coriander on top.
Okay, so we're just going to let it cook a little bit more. Yeah, so we're just going to turn down the heat underneath. And you can do this, I mean, this is a commercial oven, so the heat's a bit stronger, but at home it would kind of probably take a bit longer to cook, just on a lower heat. Just let everything kind of simmer away in the pan.
So this chili I use for chili.
Okay, so we've got 1 chili for garnishing. And you can just use whatever chili you like, but a long red chili, just sliced and still quite whole, is nice. And just pop them in. It's looking and smelling very good, in case you're wondering. And then that's coriander, but I know over in the States you call it cilantro. So fresh coriander on top.
And some black pepper.
And some cracked pepper, cracked black pepper.
That's it.
And that's it.
We put the lid on it.
So we're gonna pop a lid on top and just let it continue to slowly cook. How long, Mum? Just a few minutes?
Maybe 5 minutes.
Okay. I'll give you one more look. We're just gonna leave that there for a few minutes, but it really is just a simple thing to prepare and so delicious when you want to have breakfast at home with family or friends. And I'll show you the Afghan Naan because bread's amazing. So we bought this from, we have a recipe for naan in our book, but we just bought this from the local Afghan bakery, which is just down the road from us. And it's called lawash.
Yeah.
And it's a really, lawash is just the long flatbreads, and it's just super delicious. And we're so lucky to have so many bakeries and local kind of suppliers of ingredients now from Afghanistan and overseas. It makes it really easy for us to put really great ingredients into our food in the kitchen. So you would just tear this off and have it with the egg, and it makes a really delicious breakfast.
Also with shid chai.
And traditionally we have it with a milk tea called shid chai. The recipes for that is in the book as well. And it's just a really delicious way to start the day. But Mum and I will probably have that after we finish the talk. Yeah. We're going to sit down and have the bread and the eggs.
We will invite somebody.
No, it'll just be us. All right. So we've turned under the pan off. Yeah. But you would just let it go for a few more minutes and then have it however soft or hard you like your eggs. You can crack them, the yolks open a bit if you like.
It's actually up to you. If you like it to cook, just turn it a little bit to the other side. If you don't like it, just leave it like this.
Yeah, to just slowly cook. Slowly. Okay, put them next door. Okay, so we're just going to move next door and start a bit of a discussion. It'll be me in conversation with my mum, which I feel very grateful for, about the book Parwana, Recipes and Stories from an Afghan Kitchen. And we are actually in Parwana today. So we're just walking into one of the seating rooms and we're just going to have a seat and talk through what the book means to us and why it's written the way it's been written. So hopefully that's just a good place to sit. Great. Okay. So, I guess just by way of introduction, the book is, for those of you who might not have seen it yet, the book, I wrote it in a way that I really wanted to blend together the immense and glorious history of Afghanistan that so many people don't know much about at all. Afghanistan today in our world is kind of trapped in this lens of a narrative of war and violence and suffering alone. And, you know, based on my upbringing and my ancestry and things I know and the cuisine that I was brought up with, you know, I always had this inkling, this understanding that there is so much more to the story of Afghanistan that is embedded into the food, embedded into who I am as a person. And I really needed to explore that so that this book could be whole and full, and kind of bypass all of those trapped kind of narratives about Afghanistan. So a really big part of it was to contextualize, to broaden and deepen the understanding of Afghanistan. And that, for me, explains why the cuisine is so palatable and just so beautiful and artistic to look at. And, you'll see it through the pages of the book. Lots of people are really surprised at kind of the colors and the flavors that go into Afghan cooking. But, that's just things that have been embedded into our culture and continually expressed to this day. So the way the book has been written is each chapter has recipes that are my mum's, and they've been passed down to her over generations. And, they're things that her foremothers and forefathers taught her, or things that she learned in kitchens growing up in Afghanistan. So that's the recipe side, and then it's kind of tied together by a side that's completely a narrative, and the narrative is about it's chronological, it goes through time, and it's genealogical. I tried to write the book as much as I could through the trajectory of my mother's life, because these are her recipes. And it's my personal voice as well, of course, and my experience of displacement as a displaced person. My family left Afghanistan when I wasn't even 1 year old, a 1 year old. So 7 months. So, that's been the trajectory of my life, and my experience as a first generation migrant who spent the bulk of my life living in a diaspora community. I really wanted to explore what cuisine and what being connected to my cuisine and my ancestral kind of stories meant for me in terms of how I could live my life and carve out a deeper sense of identity. So the way I'm going to just structure this chat with my mum is just kind of go through the chapters, give you a bit of a feel, and just have a chat, really. It's nothing too formal. But the first chapter of the book is about the kind of ancient history of Afghanistan. And the reason that the food is so kind of familiar to so many people, even though it's unique within its own right, is because Afghanistan geographically sits at the center of Central Asia, which is where the ancient Silk Roads kind of all converged. So it was kind of this meeting place. And in the book, I say it's the meeting place of empires. The narrative of Afghanistan today is the graveyard of empires, but it's also a birthplace. There was so much creativity and cultural fusions that happened there that spread out to the rest of the world, that shapes our world into modernity, into what it is today. So the first chapter, I talk about the different kind of ancient empires that have been through Afghanistan. So the Achaemenid Empire of ancient Persia, the ancient Greeks, Alexander the Great passed through and married Roxanne there. The Indians were there with the ancient Mauryan Empire, and they brought Buddhism into Afghanistan, and there are still all these monuments that honor that Buddhism all through Afghanistan. And then, of course, the Arab and Islamic influence comes into the country, as well as Genghis Khan, the Mongolian kind of influence, and then the great Mughal Empire of Babur, who is buried in a garden in Kabul. And all of these people either passing through the trade networks brought in different ingredients that fused with local indigenous and native ingredients, or stayed and settled for hundreds of years. So this has had this really profound impact on the culture and cuisine of Afghanistan. It really is this marbling of identities, and that comes through in the cuisine. So the first chapter we talk about recipes that kind of embody this spirit that is now encoded into Afghan food, and it's really about traditions of hospitality and generosity and copiousness that kind of arise from this very ancient history of, you know, different people passing through and being hospitable to like these all different kinds of people, as well as kind of really ancient traditions. So Zoroastrianism of ancient Persia, you know, that's part of Afghanistan's history. And we have this festival called Nowruz, which is New Year, and it's a really important festival for a lot of people in that region. And that is an ancient Zoroastrian tradition that lives on to this day. So I wanted to ask my mum what she remembers about
the first day of the spring is Nowruz.
That's right. So Nowruz is celebrated on the spring equinox.
Yeah, this spring is start and Nowruz, that meaning everything is alive and start.
It's like refreshing and rebirth and
the winter gone and the active season are coming.
Yes.
Everything go back to life, even the animal, the Parwana, butterflies.
The butterflies, so which is really nice in hindsight. Name of the restaurant. Yeah. But yeah, so Mum, one of the really special things about Nowruz is the food.
Yeah.
And can you just tell us a little bit? And we've got all the recipes, a lot of the important recipes like the mai, which is the fish, and the jalebi in the book, and the hafmewa, which is like a fruit compote. And these are all dishes that are made during Nowruz.
We celebrate Nowruz, and the night of for tomorrow is the first day of the spring.
Yes.
That night,
okay,
the start Nowruz. Well, for this night especially, make like, you know, homemade yogurt, which is because it is white and we have really good, like, you know, feeling about white color. Yeah. And also sabzi chalao, which is for this night it is spinach with chalao with rice.
Yes.
That is very simple. We eat just sabzi chalao with and yogurt. Yes. And in the night, and everybody praying and making good wishes for the next year. And everybody together, they celebrate this night. And for tomorrow, but the same night, for tomorrow, we make afmewa.
Yes. Yeah. Which is the fruit compote, and that means 7 fruits, but you can put a bit more or less fruits and nuts into it. Yeah.
But it is very nice, good quality dry fruit. We buy it and then we soak it. All night, and for tomorrow about mid of the day they're ready with the beautiful juice with the
so all the flavors kind of come into the water, the syrup of the compote, and it's just meant to be like, I guess, the sweetness.
It's the sweetness from the fruit.
From the fruit, and that's I guess symbolic of how you want to start the year.
I know, and this fruit, this syrup or this juice, as every fruit, you can feel it in it.
You can just, everything. You can taste all the different. Okay, so the next kind of, so after kind of exploring this really interconnected history of Afghanistan and how that's kind of embedded into the cuisine and the traditions that surround Afghan food and the way we have food, I come into the part of my mother and father's life where Afghanistan begins to emerge and take on its own identity as a nation, and it kind of emerges from the mists of this ancient history. And people of Afghanistan are traditionally like an amalgam of different ethno-linguistic tribes, but for various reasons, Afghanistan develops this sense of nationhood and identity. And one of the first people to kind of develop that sense of togetherness is a leader called Ahmad Shah Durrani. And then from him, we come into the era where, there are all these things going on around Afghanistan that influence the shape of the nation and its identity. And of course, it's not spared from geopolitical tensions all around it, not least being the kind of battle for that region, that conduit. So Afghanistan shares a border with India before Pakistan was created, and Persia. And so this is of great interest, obviously, to Britain at the time of the East India Company. And, you know, Russia on the rise, Tsarist Russia is on the rise in the 1800s as well. And these kind of tensions for Britain trying to protect its interests in India really influences what happens politically in Afghanistan. But long story short, Afghanistan tries to develop its own sense of identity, and this emerges with really kind of great reformer leaders like Amanullah Khan, and this is in the 1900s, early 1900s, which is a time when, you know, my lived memory of my ancestry starts to kind of come into the picture. So this is what we talk about in chapter 2. And it's also the chapter in the book where I introduce my mum into the book, and, you know, she's a small child kind of growing up in Afghanistan during a time when there's this real sense of cultural and spiritual and intellectual flourishing. And there's a kind of a real push by the king, who during my mum's time is Zahir Shah, and he's king for about 40 years. And he's a moderate, kind of relatively just ruler. And a lot of things are starting to change in Afghanistan. People, its leaders, are trying to reform and create a constitution that is compatible with like Islamic principles as well as modernity, and build diplomatic ties. So that's in 1964 that constitution's written. So I just wanted to, you know, you can read all about it in the book, but because my mum's here, I just wanted to ask her, you know, like, what are your memories of like food and family and kind of the communality of being all together during that time?
Well, that was the best time I remember, and I really, really remember it because we have very good memory from that time, and all of the family, even far family,
Extended family.
yeah, they just come and they visit us, and we make, like, do you know that sort of program to go somewhere together,
Like picnics and day trips.
Yeah, and then everybody brings something like really big, like somebody maybe cook kebab, somebody make something else, and we go to beautiful gardens everywhere. And that time they built in the garden there is, like, you know, the sort of fruit trees and flowers.
Yeah, so there's lots of orchids, and a lot of things grow in Afghanistan, like fruits, nuts.
Yeah.
That
And
kind of thing.
before we have our lunch, we will just eating a lot of fresh walnuts, fresh almond, and this sort of it's all in the tree. And our lips will become like red because of the walnut is making so red, and our hands were so red, and we were so happy we have red lips.
So yeah, really in that chapter I wanted to convey this sense of that kind of time, and that's also the chapter that the tokhma banjanami, the eggs, that breakfast eggs we cooked, it kind of comes in that chapter, because my mum, when I was writing the book, was telling me about these memories of, you know, being on picnics and day trips with family, and her dad kind of preparing that for everyone, out in these beautiful gardens. And
my dad used to keep the chickens,
yes.
for to have very fresh egg. And in the morning he was free the chicken, they were running everywhere, and we were
free range chickens.
Yeah, free range chicken, and we went to the house,
the hen house,
like collecting the eggs and bring it to the kitchen. And my dad used one big tray of, like, you know, to cook the egg for us,
like a big pot.
Like it was like, you know,
a shallow
pot. And then he cooked for us with the tomato, and like just I cooked like
what we just cooked then.
And then one day my father forgot to put the black pepper on it, and then my brother said, when I sleep, and I say, oh, I wish we had some black pepper on it.
The one thing he forgot. Oh, there you go. So they had a keen sense of what was going into the food even then. And so what obviously happens in Afghanistan is something that a lot of people know about today. And throughout chapter 3 and 4, I kind of go into detail, really trying to explore, even for myself, trying to understand, you know, what happens in Afghanistan. How do we go from this sense of kind of real cultural flourishing and hope and kind of real sense of vastness for the future of the country to you know, where things are at now. And really it's a story of dogma, imported foreign ideologies kind of come into the country and really change the trajectory of what Afghanistan is. And so during the 70s and 80s is when a lot of people are displaced from Afghanistan because of the rise of communism, which is really quite a foreign ideology to Afghan people. And Afghanistan did need to kind of reform and change, that was true, but the means that it happened through was not right for the people, and it was rejected. And so lots of kind of unraveling happens during this time. And I go into the story of how my family, by the mid 80s, myself and my 3 other sisters were all born, and it's also the height of the Cold War. So at this time in the 70s and 80s is when there's Soviet and American tensions kind of playing out in Afghanistan. Sadly, it descends into a lot of kind of violence and chaos. And the 70s and 80s is really a very sad time, a devastating time for the culture and history of Afghanistan. It's when a lot of people leave and take with them the knowledge of culture and traditions, and the kind of the aura of the country changes. And so my family comes to Australia in 87, and I kind of tell the story in the book, but we do kind of come in via, we're refugees in Pakistan for a year or so, and then from there we have the good grace to kind of make our way to Australia on humanitarian grounds. But what I really wanted to talk about with my mum is about, you know, how food kind of changes and how the meaning of food changes. So, and I go into it in the book as well. So if for a while it's about, you know, your sense of identity, and you kind of take that for granted because you're living on your ancestral lands and everything's kind of happening all around you, right? Then by the time we come to Australia, food changes in meaning, and it becomes about memories of your ancestry and your history. And it really, for us as displaced people, I kind of started to explore this idea of having to reconcile lots of things that seem totally paradoxical. So like suffering and joy, you know, like those two things are forever a part of our experience as displaced people. And you have to kind of merge those things together to make the most of where you are and to contribute to the place that you're in, and to also just honor everything good that you have in your life as well, and not take anything for granted. So I wanted to ask my mum about, you know, what food meant to you, and why was it important for you to teach us about food when we kind of came to Australia as this young family with almost nothing, and that we had to start again. And what role did food play in that for you? Well, you know, when we were talking about it, you were telling me about how it was important for you to kind of pass this on because it was about preserving it.
Yeah, I always think about this. How can I teach my I always think about that. How can I teach my children to learn the cooking? And it was my wish that they learn how to cook, because I know cooking is so important. If you cook, life will be so easy. And especially, I wanted the traditional food from Afghanistan they learn. And one day I make food for one big wedding, and the people were coming in. They keep telling me, please transfer this to your kids. Please
Keep
don't
it
lose
alive.
it. Yeah, keep it alive. And I was thinking about this, and finally, I teach them like slowly they learn. But when the book come, now I relieve. I know everything is there. And now, other night, my grandchild, she cooked from the book. It come really nice, and she was so happy. And I say, okay, that's it. Alhamdulillah. Now they can cook from whatever they like.
Because it's all in the book.
Yeah.
And I guess just to go a little bit in about how the restaurant came to be. So, you know, as when we moved to Australia in 87, you know, my parents essentially had to start again. And my sisters and I, we were all young, and we kind of went through the education system and everything here in Australia. And, you know, so life for us was obviously very different to what it was for my parents. And so this kind of connection to our own history happened through language. So Farsi was our first language growing up, and also through food. Like food was another huge part of how we stayed connected to each other and also to the community, so the diaspora community here in Australia, and also stayed connected to our history in that way. So it was always this really important part of our life, and everything we did revolved around food, you know, like having guests around, you know, and you would kind of sit down and make the dumplings together or the bologna together, and it was just a really kind of it was a means, a conduit for like joy and kind of doing things together and bonding, and so food went on to become something very central in our lives. And my mum kind of mentioned it earlier, but the way Parwana as a restaurant came to be was because, you know, she was just doing like catering jobs for like family, friends, and then more and more people kind of loved it.
Yeah, they love it and they order it, and they still order, like, you know, they catering job. Sometimes I have it, have it.
Yeah, and so that kind of gave us a sense of understanding that people love the food, people are connecting with the food, and, you know, maybe we could try just like a small little shop front and see what happens.
Yeah, and the food you can see, like, you know, peaceful life. It show, like, you know, your feeling toward the people. And
yeah, so it's a really nice thing to be able to share like a really important and beautiful part of our history and our culture to be able to share.
To share it, and it's very important,
And it really has just opened up so many different conversations about Afghanistan, about people as displaced people, migrants and refugees. You know, I think that through food, we've been able to have just bypass all sorts of really terrible and kind of narrow assumptions and challenge that directly, but through something really beautiful and delicious.
I know, and I wish for everybody in the world they have enough food to eat. Enjoy it.
Yeah, and so one of the chapters in the book is about Parwana and about, you know, what our favorites at the restaurant, things like the eggplant dish became like a sudden hit. And it's a really delicious dish. It's in the book, and, you know.
About Banjan, I have one story.
Okay, so Banjan means eggplant. Yes.
Yeah, one day my oldest daughter Fatima, she started one job, like, you know, the flower job, to decoration for flower for everything, and she was doing this, and she said to me, "Mom, I dreamed something," and I said, "What?" It was about nearly 25 years ago. We didn't have the restaurant yet, and I said, "What did you dream?" See, I dream a lot of like, you know, eggplant farms. It was there was 100 eggplant there, and she said, I said to myself, I have flower business. Why I dream about the eggplant? And I said, oh, I don't know, Fatima, what is this eggplant? And now I know the meaning of the eggplant. It is exactly, we cook 100 kilos. It is not joking. Sometimes we have the woman,
like food festivals and that kind of thing.
Kilo in 4 days.
400 kilos of eggplant in 4 days. So I guess the dream was a premonition that life would revolve around eggplant, which is nice. And I guess just to slowly kind of round off the conversation, well, I guess just quickly, one other thing, there's rice is a really important part of Afghan cuisine, and in the chapter it's quite dedicated to the different types of rice dishes that we have. It's a central part of our food. Rice forms a centerpiece: curries, dumplings, naan, accompaniments, salads. Everything kind of comes together on your plate around the rice.
Yeah, I know. Rice is the beautiful thing on the table for eating.
Yes.
Yeah. And it is like each rice is cooking different way.
So there's different techniques for the types of rices you can cook, and we kind of go into that in the book. Palau, chalau, shula, which is like a sticky rice.
Sticky rice, yeah, and also like orange palau and other palau, all of them they cooking different way.
Yes.
So
Yes, so we do go into that in the book. That's just a picture of a really kind of loved rice dish in Afghanistan, the Kabuli palau. And our rice is always topped with, or kind of things are mixed through it, like legumes or meat, that kind of thing. But they're always topped with really beautiful things, like candied orange peel and nuts, or caramelized carrots, sultanas and nuts, that kind of thing. It's just quite striking on the table as well.
Yeah, and most of the people, they also love plain palau.
Yes, you can do plain rice too.
Yeah.
And so I guess one of the things I round off with in the book is about how culture evolves, and how culture is not this static thing, and food as a proxy for the expression of culture is not this static thing. It changes alongside people and their experiences, and everything is kind of encoded into the ingredients and the recipes and how food is shared. And for us in our life, that has meant this adaptation. And my sisters and I, we went back to Afghanistan, and the experience for that for us in our food kind of really shaped what we did next with our food when we opened up our little lunch spot, Kuchi Deli, and you can read about that in the book as well. I won't go into a lot of detail. And then the final recipe in the book is called Murabai Anjir, which is a fig jam. And the reason I ended with that is to honor these cycles of creativity. It was a recipe, it was my grandfather's favorite, my mum's father, he used to love making it, and he was really good at making it. And I just thought, when you take a long enough view of history, you start to see that things happen in cycles. Nothing is kind of linear, nothing is set. And I really feel that that's some of the most prescient lessons about Afghanistan, beyond these kind of narratives of just suffering, which consign it to something that deprives it of all of its kind of beauty and its rich splendor, and what its people have been through and what they stand for. We can kind of see how things come in cycles, and how our histories are about exchanges of ingredients and goods, yes, but also philosophies and ideas, and that we really need to recognize the interconnection that is a necessary part of what it is to be human. And rather than just these ideas of domination, of one culture prevailing over all else, where nobody else matters, nobody else's voices and stories matter, that there really is this space and this need, this very important need in our world now more than ever, to honor that interconnection and the cross-pollination that has always defined who we are. And for me, the process of writing the book was a way to really unearth that in a manner that was very kind of personal, and which was very much about exploring my own depths. And that's kind of what I came up with, and it's all kind of manifested in this book, and what food means to me because of how it's been passed down to me by my mother and my family. So Mum, just to finish off our little chat, what are your kind of hopes for food, for our food, our cuisine, and what do you think, for the book, and just for Afghanistan generally?
Oh, good. Alhamdulillah. I think the food that Afghan food is getting famous, and people love it.
People know about it.
Yeah, now people know about it, and I hope it continue like this, and other people come and they introduce the Afghan food to people. I wish you do it honestly, in the right way, and the traditionally we cook. You should do it like this. Some people, they change it. I hope they don't do this. And our book is completely, we didn't change anything. It is their old food in Afghanistan. We used to cook it, and the family used to cook it. That is why I brought it here. And I hope, and always hope, it is better to have hope. Everything will go back to better way, and everybody will be happy.
And people get to visit Afghanistan one day again in our lifetimes, we hope, because there's a lot there for all of us, not just for Afghans, but for all of us, no matter where we're from.
Everybody, if Afghanistan get peace, everybody in the world will be have peace, because at the moment the situation is really bad enough. But inshallah, we hope it get better.
Yeah, and our just small contribution to that discussion is to help people, or allow people to want to connect with Afghanistan in a way that's much broader and much deeper, and in a way that they can share that with their own family and friends, and kind of explore see themselves in our story, and kind of take that on and make it their own. So that's our hope, and thank you so much for having us. I'll pass back to Audrey.
Yeah, we're so glad to have you both. Looks like there's a lot of questions. So let's jump into that. Lark asks, does the book include the secrets of Kadu Borani?
Sure does, Lark. The Kadu Borani is there, so have a flick through. You'll find it.
Wonderful. We haven't, sorry?
Pumpkin. It's just a pumpkin dish layered in yogurt and delicious herbs.
Yeah. That sounds so good. I'm so hungry. What food do you gravitate towards when you're having a rough day? What's your comfort food?
What do you eat when you're kind of feeling a bit sad or something? What makes you feel comfortable?
Fried potato.
Mum does fried potatoes, so there you go. Good old fry. Yeah, and also the sticky rices, because they're just very warm and wholesome.
Oh, that sounds so good. All right. What prompted the family to open the restaurant after decades of living in Australia? What convinced you to take the leap?
چرا میگن آخر restaurant was کردیم بعد از like 20 سال
First, because the kids were so like young, I didn't want to take them to to school, to library, bring them back, and I was so busy with them, and I didn't want to work in that time just because of them. And then when they grew up and they were in uni, we started the restaurant.
Yeah, so it really came about when we all worked together, and everyone in the family, all of my sisters, mum, dad, we really kind of contributed everything we knew to make it happen. And it all just happened quite organically. We didn't have any designs for like a restaurant or whatever. It just happened because of catering took off, and we thought, oh, why don't we just try? If nothing else, we'll have a catering kitchen, and it just happened from there.
So it's just a team organic work.
And
pretty
also,
much.
We started as a team, like family. We started the restaurant, and then the customer, they really, really, really support us. The designer come as customer. We didn't know he designed, and then they offer, we will design your restaurant.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Come and do it. And the other come, I will do this for you. Come on, do it. Thank you.
Yeah.
So they really love the restaurant.
Yeah, we did have a lot of local love and support. Definitely.
Hopefully I can come visit one day. It sounds so good.
We'd love you all to come visit.
Farida, we have a question for you. How do you think your younger self would react if you were told that one of your children in the future would write a cookbook based on your cooking?
Oh my God, it is my wish. I hope they do it. I couldn't even do it.
Sorry, I'm just going to translate in. So میگه جوان که بودین فکر میکردین که یک روز دختری شما یک دخترتان در کتاب میکرد. Like reactionتان دو وقت شاید چی بود؟
In that time, I couldn't cook. Honestly, I couldn't cook. When I was really young, and I was just eating everything ready. And one day, one of my sisters, somebody said to me, "What you will do if you marry? What you will eat?" And I said, "I will go to kebab shop." And they laughed too much. But in that time, I really love cooking. I was pretending I don't, but I was always in the kitchen with them, cook, and they show me how to cook it, and I love it. And I didn't know one day it will become like this. Like, one of my daughter will write the book, and it will be everywhere. That's just so amazing feeling I have now. Yeah.
Oh, you guys have the most amazing family. So we have Shelly asking, is there one dish considered the national dish of Afghanistan, or is this more of a regional concept?
Well, I guess the Kabuli palau would be considered the national dish of Afghanistan. Yeah.
Everybody
There are regional differences, and like say in some regions, like a particular type of rice is more popular or whatever, just based on produce and climate and that kind of thing. But the national dish is the Kabuli palau.
All right, so definitely try that one.
Yeah.
If nothing else. We have another question. Were there any ingredients that were especially difficult to find in Australia when you were first living there in the 80s and 90s and trying to cook family recipes? And what was that like?
Yeah, it was in that time. It was very hard to find
Pistachios.
It was
Believe it or
really,
not.
it was
Really? Okay.
for me to have pistachio on my food, like for some food. But slowly, that was come a lot of like Iranian shop, Afghan shop, Arabic shop. Then
Yeah.
yeah.
There's definitely a big difference. When my family first moved in the 80s, it was such a smaller kind of diaspora community, especially like Afghans, that kind of thing, living in Australia. But like over the last like 20, 30 years, there's just been kind of an explosion. I guess lots of waves of migration, and a really great effect has been lots of people kind of bringing in all the ingredients we need.
Yeah, now everything is here.
You can find it. Globalization.
Yeah, there's one of the perks, definitely. You can get the pistachios at the grocery now.
Yeah.
All right. We have a couple left. Have you run an ancestry migration trace like 23andMe? And if so, were there any surprises? Did it match the family narrative?
I have never done anything like that, and I'm not sure if I want to. But just because of, I guess, I don't know, I think there's a lot of like ethical issues around that kind of a thing that we don't kind of really hear about much. But also, if we ever, I would, the part of being like as a displaced person with a country that has now so much kind of war and that kind of thing, you find that you run up against knowing about the extent to which you find out about your history is quite short. It's just kind of like verbal things that people have remembered and they tell you. And the way those things and people were honored and remembered is really different to, I suppose, the Western sense, where everything's kind of recorded by name and date of birth and that kind of thing. Like so much of our tradition is just oral and thereabouts in terms of when people were born and that kind of thing. So it's a very different kind of approach. But you know what, if I ever did know, I'm sure we would be so surprised about what runs through our blood, because Afghan people look so different from one region to another, and it's just because there has been so much different DNA in the region. So I'm sure it would be really surprising.
All right, we have one last question. This is also from Lark. If people were to try one Afghan dish from your book, which would you recommend?
Oh, for them,
One dish
I
choose.
Yeah, one dish if I choose. I wish they make ashak.
Ashak,
really delicious.
Yeah, ashak is one of the dumpling dishes. It's stuffed with like a chive or a leek, and it's boiled and it's kind of dressed with lamb mint sauce and a garlic yogurt and herbs, and it's really good. I would say the bolani as well, stuffed flatbreads, really great.
Oh my God, I'm so hungry.
Hard to make.
Yeah, easy to make.
Right. Wonderful. Well, thank you both. Durkhanai, thank you so much for sharing your time. Farida, thank you for joining us. This is all we've got time for, but I just want to thank you again. This was such a lovely talk. I'm starving now. I'm gonna go make dinner. I hope you guys enjoy your breakfast, which looks delicious.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah,
It's really
of
sweet.
course. And thank you to everyone at home who's tuning in and showing up for authors, publishers, indie book selling, and our incredible staff here at Harvard Bookstore. If you'd like to support Durkhanai and the bookstore. Click in the links in the chat if you'd like to purchase Parwana. And we sincerely appreciate your support now and always. Please, please, please make sure to shop indie. Have a wonderful night, everyone. Have a wonderful morning.
Thanks, guys. See you. Bye.
Bye.